going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImmaCSports.
Instagram is also at ImmaCSports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 233. If I sound a little weird, I've been a little sick this week, but nothing too crazy. We're still doing 233 on time, Tuesday, and it's going to be mostly baseball, right? We got a full week of spring training under our belts here, and just try to slowly transition into the baseball season.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun time of the year if you're a baseball fan, because we've obviously had college baseball be going on the last 2 weeks, and now we're really starting to get spring training going on. Games have been happening for about a half of a week now at this point. And this is where headlines and storylines just go off the charts here of, oh, those guys on pace for a huge season. You know, he hit a ball hard today or something like that. And just all the speculation and stuff like that where you can't really be wrong at this point is pretty fun. So we'll get into a ton of different things today. Actually, kind of the same thing that we did a year ago today. We're doing, if you were to start your franchise today, who would be your top 5 choices at 5 different positions? I was looking at my list from last year, and I definitely, there's some changes on there. So it's not just like we're repeating the same stuff. A lot has changed in the last 365. But yeah, it should be a fun episode. We'll get right into it. And I'll start off with my opener. It was pretty close to what it was last week, as UCSB and Stanford baseball both swept again this past weekend. SB had a bit of a unconventional sweep because they were playing in like a tournament type thing in San Diego. So they had a game against Seattle, San Diego State, and California Baptist. And of course, they won all 3 of those. And then Stanford had a 4-game set against the University of Washington and took all 4 of those. So Stanford's 8-0. UCSB is 6-1, playing their 8th game right now against Pepperdine as we speak. But it's a good start for both those teams, and exactly how you'd want it for the teams playing in February.
Yeah, shout out West Coast College baseball. Always a couple sleepers every year. Stanford definitely going to be on that list this year. Other than the Warriors finally putting together a couple of good games back-to-back with Jimmy Butler, the best thing I've seen has been some of the young members of the A's team in spring training so far contributing right away. Lawrence Butler's been on fire. We've seen Brent Rooker drive in a couple runs, even though he's the hot name in Mesa these days after getting that contract. How about Oswaldo Bido? 4 Ks the other day. He looks really good for a guy who was kind of thrown into the rotation, not necessarily based off of anything other than he's the only guy left. He's been looking pretty good. And how about first-round pick out of Wake Forest, Nick Kurtz? Have to do that pause there. First baseman from Wake Forest. Drove in 2 more runs today. He looks really good. Maybe not as far away as we thought. Just nice to actually see it in person, not just hypothetically on Zips, on Fangraphs. What could they do? We're seeing them driving runs with our own eyes on Twitter, of course, because these games aren't live as much.
Yeah, definitely one of the more frustrating things with spring training games also is that they're not all hooked up to StatCast, so you can't really see all the data. We saw it actually for the A's first game, and we saw it for the game yesterday, even though yesterday's game wasn't televised. And those are the only 2 games that we've had real data from. And so my notes from those is that we saw JT Jen actually pitch in the first game against the Padres. He kind of got lit up, but his sinker was up about 1.5 miles velocity-wise. Obviously, all this stuff, though. So first game of spring training doesn't mean it's going to stick with you until August or September, but it's definitely worth noting that you have some results on the table with this stuff. So JT Jen may be up in velocity. Oswaldo Bido was his arsenal graded out well. Hogan Harris as well, too. And perhaps the biggest thing that I noticed was Gunnar Hoglund, a guy that we drafted, or not drafted, but we got in the trade from Matt Chapman a couple years ago, has really not been able to piece too much together. Had some decent results last year, but velocity was still down from the guy that we traded for back in 2022. His fastball was at 97 miles per hour yesterday, which is by far the most that we've seen. He threw a StatCast or Baseball Savant had as a slider. I thought it was a cutter based off of how it was moving at 93 miles per hour, which is a harder offering of that pitch. His curveball is up to 3,000 RPMs, which is really good. And his changeup looked pretty good as well, too. So maybe a guy that the A's didn't have too much on at this point in his career, maybe getting back into that oh shit, maybe this guy actually is a prospect, which would be fun to see. And also Michel Otanez, who was dominant for us at the end of last year, had his fastball up around 100. But yeah, StatCast not going to be available for all these games. Really wish it was available for this one because Luis Morales, one of our top pitching prospects, threw a shutout inning, and we're just not going to know how to stuff grade it out. I know it was up to 98, but would have liked to see some more data on that stuff. But still, fun times in spring training so far, and it seems to be all going good for the A's young team. Moving on, though, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode. What we're doing, if you were to start a franchise today, who would be your top 5 blanks? We'll start off with the catchers. For all these lists, I have quite a few honorable mentions because I was going to honorable mentions as, okay, I could understand a case for this guy at the 5 spot or something like that. So Do you have any honorable mentions for the backstop position before we get into our 5?
I do. I tried to limit it. I know years past I've done the same thing. I had about 10 honorable mentions, but most of these positions are going to be around 3 guys that I really contemplated. And at catcher, for me, that was Kyle Teal, the White Sox top prospect, Wilson Contreras, the brother of a guy who may be on this list for both of us, and Austin Wells, a guy who's all about the potential and the power lefty swing for the Yankees.
Yeah, I had 5 guys on my honorable mentions list. First of which is Gabriel Moreno, a guy who's had great contact in his MLB career so far. Really still looking for that power to make him into that top 5 catcher, but he's a good defender as well too. So maybe in the future list he could be on here when we do this in, 2027 or something. Yainer Diaz is another guy I wanted to talk about. His bat definitely is worthy of being on this list, but the defense is just, it's kind of laughable at the catcher position. So maybe they move him off of there and he becomes left fielder or something like that. But as of right now, he's not on the list. Wilson Contreras as well too. His brother will definitely be on this list. But maybe Wilson's getting a little bit up there in age, had some bad injury luck last year. I know he broke his hand or his wrist on hit by pitch early in the season, and that kind of cost him the entirety of his season, it felt like. And then my 2 prospects I wanted to talk about, Sam Basayo and Kyle Teal. Kyle Teal hit a homer off Roki Sasaki today, it looked like, in some live BPs against some Dodger guys. And then Sam Basayo, super young prospect. Will he be playing catcher for the Orioles? Probably not, because they have a guy that will be on this list for both of us, I'd imagine. But still a pretty good prospect, and I'd imagine to profile as a big league catcher in a couple of years from now. So number 5, Skyler, who do you have at the number 5 spot?
Yeah, I thought about getting fancy with this pick. You can kind of tell with my honorable mentions. But I think I'm supposed to pick Francisco Alvarez here, despite the disappointing season. 25 homer capability from 2 years ago. But the difference is we already know that he's great behind the plate. It's 80-plus percentile with the framing and the pop time on Baseball Savant. That's going to translate a lot better than someone like Bo Naylor or Shane Langlear's fan favorite for us.
Yeah, number 5 for me, I'm going to go with Patrick Bailey. 4.5 WAR last year, despite only having an 81 WRC plus. So what does that mean? So you're the best defensive catcher in baseball. I understand if ABS comes in, automatic ball strike, his WAR might go down a little bit because he's just such a good framer, steals so many strikes and therefore so many more outs in the game. But if he just becomes a league average bat with the defense that he plays, he has the ability to become the best catcher in baseball and just become a modern day WAR machine of just like 6+ WAR seasons over and over and over again. He is only 25 as well too, going into his 3rd big league season. So I'd expect Patrick Bailey to be around for at least another 5 to 6 years at a very productive rate. Next up, number 4.
At 4, I'm going to go with Cal Raleigh of the Mariners. We've had way too many instances where a top catching prospect all of a sudden can't hit anymore. So I'm going to go with the safer pick here. This is now back-to-back years with 30-plus homers, and he's the number 2 framer in baseball behind Patrick Bailey. So I went with him over Bailey.
Yeah. Number 4 for me is going to be where I slot Austin Wells. I know you gave him an honorable mention on, but I think after his rookie season, there's an argument to be made for him to be in the top 5. He posted a great rookie season, 3.4 WAR, 96% fielding run value, according to StatCast, 105 WRC plus. The bat is a tier lower than guys like Raleigh and Contreras for sure. as of right now, but I think the defense is up there with those guys. And with him only being 25 years old, I think he's going to be just like Bailey, effective for the next handful of years. Number 3.
I try to go with guys that I would prefer on my dream team. So my top 3 at catcher is all about consistency. I'm going to stick with Will Smith here. He's dominated most catchers in WAR over the past 4 years. And to be fair, he is in a great situation to just sit back and drive in runs whenever it's necessary for the Dodgers. But the metrics love him too. Other than framing, he's been pretty solid behind the dish. 25 homers as a catcher. You don't really need to be the best framer in the league.
And number 3 for me is going to be where I slot Adley Rutschman. Really hoping the second half of last season was an anomaly. His 585 OPS and only 3 home runs was quite alarming for a guy that we've come accustomed to being one of the best two-way catchers in the big leagues over the last few years. I'd expect him to go back to being at least a 4-WAR player in 2025 and beyond. Switch hitter, of course, solid defensive value. He can really do it all when he's at his best. So I think Adley Rutschman, only being 27 years old, definitely might not have the same value as what he did 3-4 years ago at this point, but still a hell of a guy to have behind there. Number 2.
At number 2, I'm going to go with William Contreras of Milwaukee. Maybe the highest ceiling out of anyone on this list, even though we both talked about prospects. But he could always rake. He's got 2 silver sluggers, but now it's all about the defense with him. It's shot way up, 5th in MVP voting last season. It seems like this is the benchmark for an elite catcher. 20 homers, 250, at least 1 WAR from defense and framing. And this is a guy I would love to have on my squad.
Yeah. Number 2 for me is where I went with Cal Raleigh. I put my bias aside here, even though I do not like this guy as an A's fan. He was tied with William Contreras for the highest WAR of any catcher in 2024 at 5.4. He's been the best power bat at the position while being a top-tier defender for his entirety of his time in the league. 91 homers over the last 3 years, and in 2024 alone, he posted a 15.4% barrel rate, which is in the 96th percentile, so damn good. Don't expect him to hit 250, but I think you can pencil in 30 homers and great defense every year from him for the next 5 or 6 as well, too. So Cal Raleigh gets the number 2 spot for me. And number 1.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Adley Rutschman, just like last year. It's kind of hard to believe he's already 27, but it's the same age as Contreras. He's already one of the best Orioles I've ever seen since he was called up 3 years ago. But for me, what Adley brings to the table is how I think his bat's going to last a lot longer than some of the other catchers on this list. He's got fine defensive metrics, but here's the thing. He's never going to hit below league average if he continues his pace. This is the Mauer or Posey of the StatCast era, as long as he stays healthy. So I'm going to give him the nod over Contreras.
I did not, though. I kept William Contreras as my number 1 guy. Like I said, tied with Raleigh for highest WAR of any catcher in 2024 at 5.4. I think he's probably the best offense-defense combo catcher in the league at this point. And he's also been one of the most consistent bats in the league at this position. 125 or higher WRC plus in every single full season that he's played. And he is young, same age as Adley Rutschman, as you said, only 27 years old. So he's young and he's good. And the Brewers got him for technically Asteri Ruiz, I think. So they did a good job on that one. Yeah. Moving to the first base position, the honorable mentions here are kind of fun.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I didn't add him on here because he's 35. I just was thinking a little younger. Give us an opportunity to talk about an extra guy that we wouldn't have otherwise. Christian Walker's great, but he's a little older, and Cody Bellinger's looking for that career resurgence with a short porch.
Yeah, I have a few guys as my honorable mentions. First of which, Christian Walker. I think he has a huge season in Houston, and I don't think that we're going to be getting a repeat of a Jose Abreu situation over there in Houston. Nathaniel Lowe, another guy who didn't have the greatest season to his standards last year, but I think can definitely work as the vet in that Nationals lineup. Tristan Casas, who had a down year last year, but at the second half of 2023, he just felt like one of the most locked-in hitters at the plate, and I think we could see him get back to that if he is healthy going into 2025. And then I think you can make a case for any of the top three first baseman prospects, Jack Caglione, Bryce Eldridge, and Nick Kurtz as well too. All studs. All expect them to have potential to hit 40 homers a year and hit 265 to 300 each year. So I did not put them in my list though. But number 5, who do you got?
Yeah, you may be wondering how in the world I don't have Freddie Freeman, and I said screw it. Give me Bryce Eldridge at the 5 spot. 6'7", former two-way. He hit 29 major league homers straight out of high school, and I love that swing. So simple yet powerful. This should translate pretty well based off of the at-bats we've seen so far in the spring. He just reminds me so much of Matt Olson.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a sleeper here, but my number 5 spot is going to go to Michael Busch. His K rate was super high in his rookie year, but posted an 11.1 walk rate, which is nice. 119 WRC plus and 21 home runs in a stadium that isn't always friendly to left-handed hitters in Wrigley. The power is there for sure, and I like the profile as a perennial 30-homer, 4-WAR guy. Already 27 years old, so maybe not the youngest, sophomore player, but still a guy that I like the bat profile. I think the swing and miss will go down as he gets older and matures into his bat as well too. Number 4.
I'm going to go with Pete Alonso. This guy averages 43 homers per season. And it's been a lot of strikeouts for Polar Pete on the stretch, but one of the most feared guys in the league when he's on. Shouldn't take a whole lot of adjusting to get him back in that MVP conversation. So I'm okay with him in the top 5.
Number 4 for me, I went with Matt Olson. I know down year in 2024, but he's the best power bat on this list, and he's due for a bounce back season along with the rest of that Atlanta lineup in 2025. 24, I think, was also an anomaly for him. He walked less and struck out more than any other season he's had as a Brave, and still saw very solid average exit velocity, barrel rate, and hard hit rate numbers. So I think we see Matt Olson get back to maybe not a 50-homer guy, but at least 35 to 40-plus homers a year, and some solid defense as well, too, at the first base position. Number 3.
At number 3, I'm going with Bryce Harper. It feels like he's about 100 years old because I was 11 when he got called up, but he's just 32, which is nothing when you're talking about a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think the move to first base will end up prolonging his career, and obviously the great postseason track record. You got to have that guy on your team when you're starting fresh.
Yeah, number 3 for me, the age didn't scare me here. It's Freddie Freeman for me. I think he's the second most pure bat of anyone on this list. Somebody higher than him, perhaps Vladdy Jr., I think would be number 1 on that most pure bat first baseman type guys. 4.0 WAR in every single season since 2016. And if you take out this past year, I think that bumps up to like 5 point something. At this point in his career, though, I doubt we get 7+ WAR seasons like we've had from him in the past, but a super consistent 135 plus WRC plus bat who doesn't strike out a ton and walks at least 10%, I think is something that we could see him do into his 40s if he really wants to. So the age can scare you. I understand that for sure, but it's not scaring me. I'm picking the guy who is the new age Mr. October.
Okay.
Number 2.
At 2, I'm going Matt Olson. Ole has not missed a single game since being traded to Atlanta, only 1 year removed from the 54-homer season. I don't think his future's limited to Adam Dunn. I wouldn't worry about him, and that's why I got him up in the 2 spot. I think that he definitely has room to grow, and it's possible we haven't seen the best yet.
Yeah. Number 2 for me is going to be Bryce Harper. Definitely feels weird to put him on these first baseman lists, even though it's year 3, I think, of him now playing first base for the Phillies. You don't really need to give numbers at this point for Bryce Harper. We know who he is. We know what the bat is. He's going to hit the ball hard, walk a lot, and just be a patient guy at the plate, and one of the most feared hitters that we've seen in the 2010s, 2020s, the last 15 years as a whole. The one thing that we didn't know about him, I guess, the past couple of years was how he'd play first base defensively. And while it's not like anything crazy, I think it's all right. And he's still a plus on the plus side of first baseman defenders in general. So I'm putting Bryce at the number 2 spot, despite the years starting to slowly creep up on him. And then number one, I believe we have the same guy here.
Yeah, it's Vlad Jr. I probably wouldn't give him a $500 million contract because he's got a lot of Pujols in his game. But that's also why we love him. He's an actual hitting machine through 6 seasons, about 6 seasons. I know he got hurt halfway through there. But at only 25 years old, he's one of the few guys with the ability to put up numbers we haven't seen since the steroid era. Maybe a change of scenery is the way to get him back to his 48 homer self. And second place finish behind Otani for MVP.
Yeah, Vlad's an anomaly. I have him as my number one guy as well too. 5.5 WAR with the 165 WRC plus in 2024, with a strikeout rate at only 13.8%, 98 percentile ex-WOBA, 100th percentile expected batting average, 98th percentile expected slugging, 98th percentile average for exit velocity, 97th percentile hard hit rates, and that 93rd percent K rate while doing it all is just like numbers that just don't compute in your brain for a guy that swings that hard, hits that many home runs, and just not strike out that much. Like you said, just a ridiculous talent at this position, and only being 25 years old, due up for a contract this year. Blue Jays are going to have to give up a lot of Canadian dollars to get this guy back on their team for the long term. Moving on to second base, though, honorable mentions here. Who do you got?
Yeah, for second base, I only had two right now. Gleyber Torres, who I think is going to tear it up in Detroit, and Luis Arias. I wasn't really sure where he's going to be listed as, but he's definitely a guy who is the best at what he does. So I wanted to include him.
Yeah. This is going to be a long list of honorable mentions. The first of which I really wanted to put him on the list, but I couldn't. Matt McClain coming off an injury this past year. I think he's due for a year that would put him back on this list in a year from now. But since we haven't seen it in a year and he's been hurt, you can't take that comparative to a sure thing. And I just don't think he is that 100% sure thing at this point. Luis Garcia Jr., I think, is one of the most underrated players in baseball. Posted 3.1 more last year, and I think he could be on pace for even more than that next year. Nico Horner, one of the best defensive guys in all of the league, also has some offensive value. Otto Lopez was really, really good for the Marlins last year. Obviously, super limited stint as well, too, so I'd like to see that over a full 162 before I get any, top five lists about him. Ozzy Albies probably should be on this list. I decided to put him off just because of some of the potential of these other guys in my top five. Travis Bazzana, one of my favorite prospects that we've seen over the last few years. I think he becomes a stud, but the second base position is stacked right now. And the last guy I also have is Jackson Holliday. Haven't really seen it yet in the big leagues from him, but I'm not panicking because he is super, super young. And I think we do end up getting him to be a stud here in the near future. So number five, who do you got?
All right. Well, I'll start off with Jackson Holliday. As you just mentioned him, the biggest gripe from last season was he didn't hit the ball enough. Weak contact's going to get you into some trouble, but he's put on a lot of weight, and I trust Baltimore to give him the tools to break out like they did for Gunnar Henderson. It's not saying that this guy's going to get MVP votes right away, but he's definitely a guy I would bet on for a position like second base, where you definitely have room to grow and room to struggle.
Yeah. I usually don't like putting prospects in my top five for these positions, but I think I absolutely fell in love with Christian Campbell last year, and I think he gets onto my top five list here. I know minor league numbers are minor league numbers, but he went like ridiculously off in 2024. 20 homers, 24 stolen bases, a 14.5 walk rate, 180 WRC plus. Pipeline has him having 60 great hit tool, power tool, and speed as well too. A 5-tool player and a guy that we're really like learning more about as the days go on, because he was, I wouldn't say unknown, but like over the last 720 days, 2 years, his stock has just rocketed up, and I think we continue to see that. I like the build as well too, for a power hitter as well too from the second base position. So Christian Campbell, a rare prospect that I put on my top fives because he's going to be a stud in my eyes. So number four.
At number four, I ended up going with another guy you left off, Matt McClain over Christian Campbell. 25-year-old had an unbelievable rookie year before getting hurt, and I'm still buying his stock. Sometimes when a former shortstop moves over to second, It's because they can't handle short or whatever other reasons. But sometimes you get a guy like Matt McClain, excuse me, and it feels like he has endless range here, unlimited range for him at second base. So I'm buying in on the stock. I'm taking the risk.
Yeah, that's a fun middle infield duo as well too with him and Ellie, who we might talk about here in a little bit. Number 4, Josh Chisholm. For me, playing second base now for the Yankees. Played third base last year after he got traded. Played center field for the Marlins. Played shortstop for the Marlins before that. So he's got a ton of versatility, and I think he's got legitimate 30-30 potential with some solid defense, and that is a gateway right to the top 5 of any position in baseball. He went 19 homers, 22 stolen bases in 97 games in 2023, 24 homers and 40 stolen bases on 147 games in 2024. If his K rate drops below 20% and moves the walk rate closer to 10%, I think he could be legitimately a 6'4" guy. And we don't see that at times in the second base position. So Josh Chisholm, my number 4. On to number 3.
We're definitely not on the same page for second base because I kept Ozzie Albies on. And I get it. He's been prone to that letdown year every once in a while, just like last season. But he's only 28, and he's not going to be asked to do the same things that are probably the guy who's going to end up being number 1 for both of us is asked to do for his team. Most years he brings great defense. Healthy Albies, for me, is definitely in the top 5 if you want to take the risk. And I guess, like I said, this is my team. So I'm taking the risk at second base rather than some other positions.
Number 3 for me, it's not too often that you have 2 guys from the same team on this list when it's the same position, but I'm doing it, and I'm putting Alex Bregman, the new second baseman, at number 3 for me. We know what the bat is at this point in his career. He's posted at least a 114 WRC plus in every single season that he's played, which I think goes back to 2016, 2015 maybe. One thing that was kind of confusing for me was the walk rate was staggeringly low in 2024 at 6.9%. So I'm curious to see how that goes in 2025 and beyond. But if he was posting 4.5, 6 WAR seasons at third base in the past, I would imagine with his style of play that those numbers just jump up based off the value at second base. So I would expect some pretty ridiculous gaudy numbers from him if he ends up being the same bat that we know Alex Bregman to be and still be a solid defender at a new position in second base. Number 2.
Yeah, I got Alex Bregman as well. It's kind of like if Dustin Pedroia was on steroids. Like, I feel like he's going to love this ballpark. Who knows where all these guys are going to end up playing in the field? But hey, as of right now, second base, he's been raking. I really like what Boston's been doing.
Yeah. Number 2 for me, it's my favorite, Marcus Semien. Down year in 2024, but he still found a way to have the second highest WAR at the position with the 4.2 WAR season. If the bat bounces back, it's an easy 6 WAR guy. And completely random note, but when I was doing research, I was kind of like, this is rare. How many guys have 6 WAR seasons with 3 different teams? Because Marcus Semien does, and that just doesn't really seem like something that occurs too often. A-Rod's probably one of them, and then maybe a pitcher as well too, like
definitely Clemens,
Clemens or like Scherzer or something like that. But it doesn't happen too often. And Marcus Semien's one of those guys, and we just said a few guys that are like lockdown Hall of Famers with him as well too. So Semien getting to Cooperstown, I don't really know yet. But he's going to be a guy that when we go from 10 years from now, we're like, 30%? Like, let's jump that up a little bit more. Yeah. But moving on to number 1, I think we're unanimous for this one as well, too.
Yeah, Semien, I forgot to mention him in the honorable mentions. My bad, but I love him. He's 34, but like I said, I wanted to take risk at second base, so I went with some younger guys. It's Ketel Marte. This dude just straight up rakes when it comes to second base, and we've seen a couple of times now this guy can go over 30 homers when he plays the whole season. Unbelievable video game numbers, but in Arizona.
Yeah. Ketel's easily number 1. I don't think there's much contention for this spot either at this point. 151 WRC plus and a 6.3 WAR in 2024 with a 97th percentile ex-WOBA, 96th percentile expected batting average, 96th percentile expected slugging, and a 98th percentile average exit velocity. meaning he's hitting the ball hard and he's getting a shit ton of results. One thing about Cattell as well too, even though he's not that fast, he's an above average base runner, along with being a great fielder, or a solid fielder. I won't say great, and obviously the best bat at second base is the position. He doesn't steal much either, but I think you could definitely call him a legitimate five-tool player, and we don't have too many of those in the league. So Ketel Marte, best second baseman in baseball. There's a reason why he's been in MVP talks multiple times in his career. On to the hot corner, and what are your honorable mentions here?
Yeah, I had Jazz. I forgot to check what he was listed at in Fangraphs, but I knew he was just going to miss my list barely, so I didn't really care where he was going to get put. Jordan Westberg, who you'll probably talk about today, and Isaac Paredes, looking for a breakout season as well.
Yeah, I have two guys that I put on my honorable mentions because I think these guys are in a tier of their own, and so I kind of wanted to give them solo shout-outs. Mark Vientos and Jordan Westberg are two guys that I absolutely love. Two young guys as well, too. I think they have big seasons. But there's some more proven guys, and maybe a prospect as well, too, that just have some ridiculous potential. So I kept those two studs off the list. Number 5.
This was the hardest spot for me. I couldn't decide between Matt Chapman and Rafi Devers, but I think because Matt Chapman is the best glove I've ever seen with my own eyes, he's going to get the nod for me. Probably helps that he's a former A, maybe some homerism there, but I really like his spot with San Francisco. Him and Bob Melvin goes way beyond the numbers to me that those guys are connected still.
Now, number 5 for me is going to be Austin Riley. A down year and also an injury-riddled year in 2024 still meant that he had 2.4 WAR in 110 games. Just like Olsen, I expect him to get closer to what we are used to with him in 2025. And with where he is at age-wise, I think you can expect on average a 30-homer, 125 WRC plus in a 4.5 WAR season to just kind of be what he is for the next handful of years. So Austin Riley, he's a stud. And is my 5th best third baseman in all of baseball. Number 4.
Maybe a shocker here. This guy was 5th for me last year. I'm moving him up once. That's Junior Caminero of Tampa Bay. Only about 50 at-bats through his career so far, but we take a look at a guy like Jackson Chourio. Different position, but similar class of when he was signed. And we see all he needed was a full season to just break the heck out, to stay PG-13 on here, just completely break out. And there's not a lot of other guys that could drive in runs on that Tampa lineup right now. I'm expecting him to definitely jump up to at least the top 10 of this list. So I'm going to take a shot on him.
Yeah, Junior Caminero is my number 4 guy as well, too. Been waiting for him to pop for a couple of years now, has led to a bit of prospect fatigue. I'm not keeping a PG here. This is the year I think he goes the fuck off. I think he's got potential to be a 280 to 300 hitter with 40 homers. Does he do that this year? Probably not. But if we get 275 and 25 to 30 homers, I think he's going to be right on path to be there. One thing for him, though, I think he will need to cut down the chase rate and realize his talent at the plate and what pitchers are going to try to do to him. When we see a guy like his talent have a 20+% K rate and below 10 walk rate, it just kind of means he's trying to do too much at the plate sometimes. I think we've seen that a little bit in his very limited big league action so far. So I'm sure that the Rays are working on that with him, and he's going to be a middle of the order bat for them for the next 6 years if they don't sign him long term. So Junior's a stud, and I expect him to be the cog of that Rays lineup until they trade him or don't sign him. Number 3.
At number 3, I'm going to go with Austin Riley of the Braves. When he's on, it's a doubles machine. You're looking at 30 homers. But, it's maybe a different kind of 40-40 is his potential. Not the stolen bases, but with the doubles and the homers. Perfect in the middle of that Braves lineup. And they definitely need him to go on a World Series run. That's for sure. We've seen that throughout the years.
Yeah. Number 3 for me is going to be where I slot Rafi Devers. He's been in the league so long, and yet he feels like still young. But we know exactly what the bat is at this point in his career. Although 2024 was a interesting season for him where his K rate and his walk rate both went up by quite a bit. So maybe expect those numbers to kind of go back to the mean in 2025 and beyond. But at this point, 5-WAR player for the next 5 seasons at least. Probably even longer than that as well too. I expect the bat to be around for probably another 10 plus with Rafi. Number 2.
At number 2, I'm going to go with Manny Machado, a guy who we always mention, right? It's like the guy who was headed down the wrong path, but now he's kind of loved by everybody other than the A's and the Red Sox and the Yankees. And, it's another guy, unbelievable glove. He never makes mistakes. He's always on base. And I know he's a little older, but this would be the captain of my team.
Yeah, I left Manny off my list. Maybe just a bit of the age and maybe just a bit of that stigma that I have from him as an A's fan a while ago now at this point. Because my number 2 guy is going to be Matt Chapman. He had his best season in the MLB since 2019 and 2024. 121 WRC plus, 5.5 WAR, and lowest K rate since that season, combined with the best defense in all of baseball at the position. He also realized finally how to turn his speed into stolen bases. That's something that frustrated me so much with him with the A's. He had 11 stolen bases in his career going into 2024, and he had 15 alone in 2024. So maybe expect that to kind of be the new benchmark for him. And the question that begs for me is, could he be the first Giant to hit 30-plus homers in a season since Barry Bonds? And I think he can very much do that, if not the guy playing directly to his left in Willy Adames.
Yeah.
Number 1, this one, I don't really think it's contested either.
Yeah, it's J-Ram. All 5 tools, they won a lot of massive games thanks to him in Cleveland this year. And they got pretty close, man. Pretty close for a team nobody trusted. I'm excited to see how his career plays out because he's clearly not even close to being done.
Yeah, he's been also talking J-Ram here, of course. He's been the best third baseman in baseball for a while now at this point. 6+ WAR seasons in the last 3 of 4. He almost had the quietest 40-40 season in MLB history. He had 39 homers and 41 stolen bases last year, and I think getting close to that in 2025 is completely reasonable. His Savant page is very interesting, and I think it could be something that is used as like a pin or like a, I don't know how to describe it, but like a do you know ball benchmark of some people just like looking at the Savant page and seeing red and like, oh yeah, you're good. If you don't see red, then you're bad. If you look at Jerem's Savant page, he's not hitting the ball ridiculously hard, but for how long that the results have been there, he's really just found the sweet spot with those numbers, and you could just throw out whatever the fuck he's hitting and pencil him in for 35 homers a year, 30 stolen bases, decent defense, and just being the heart of your team for a guy that can go ahead and punch the other team's shortstop in the face.
Most consistent guy we'll talk about today.
Exactly. Yeah. Freddie Freeman's up there, but J-Ram definitely for sure. Consistent MVP numbers for the last, 6-7 years now at this point, it feels like. Moving on to shortstop, though, the most exciting position in this one. Any honorable mentions here?
Of course. Again, I try to keep it down to a minimum. So if I don't mention your guy, I'm sorry, but I kept it to 3 guys who are the best at what they do. I got Corey Seager, O'Neal Cruz, Willy Adames, all guys that, again, like I said, this would probably be the captain of most teams.
Yeah, I have 4 different honorable mentions here. However, let me just start with this. Corey Seager, I definitely think can make a case for the top 5. He's my first honorable mention. The rest of these 3 guys, I don't think you can make a case for top 5, considering the talent that we will talk about at the 5 positions. But I think definitely in future or in the past, these guys definitely could have made a list. First of which, Willy Adames. I don't want to say a 162 merchant because he's been a really good player, and I like him a lot as well too. But benefits by playing a lot. That obviously is a great skill as well too. I'm not knocking a guy that plays every single day. Ezekiel Tovar, one of my favorite players in the big leagues, not close to being a top 5 guy yet. But I think give him a couple more seasons and he might put up some pretty ridiculous numbers in Colorado. And then Dansby Swanson, pretty shitty bat last year for the Cubs, but the defense is there. And if he becomes 2022 Dansby Swanson again, we're looking at a guy that really competes for the 5 spot on this list. So those 4 guys are my honorable mentions, and I don't have any prospects on this list either.
Yeah.
Number 5.
We're going to start off with a bang. I got Ellie De La Cruz at the 5 spot. I'm a little superstitious about his game because at least his offensive game is kind of like Ronald Acuna. I don't want to see this guy get hurt. I need to see a full season before he goes up any higher. But this, we talk about J-Ram's consistency with all 5 tools. That is this guy's ceiling. It's Jose Ramirez. It's kind of scary when you watch him.
Yeah, Ellie's my number 5 as well too. I think when you look at his numbers from 2024 and just watch him play, there's some glaring holes in his game. Yeah, he still had a 6.4 WAR season in a very casual year for him. If he cuts down the errors as a defender, which he already is one of the best defenders at shortstop, but if he just makes the easier play more often than not, that'll boost that WAR. And if he swings and misses less and doesn't strike out 31.3% of the time, which is absurd, he can be the best player in the league. And if he does those 2 things, I don't even want to imagine what those potential end of season numbers could look like. We could be looking at a guy who has legitimate potential to have 50-50 seasons if he stays a Red into his prime, partially because that stadium and how easy it is to hit the ball out there. For context, left-handed hitters, I know Ellie is a switch hitter, but Juan Soto hit 37, 39 homers last year. If he played all 162 games in Cincinnati last year, he would have had 63 home runs. So bit of a different ballpark than some other ones, and I really hope Ellie takes advantage of it. He's only 23 years old. He's a month younger than me, which scares me because Ellie De La Cruz is going to make a lot of money here very soonly. Number 4.
This is weird to say, but at the 4 spot, I have Francisco Lindor, one of the most valuable players in all of baseball, yet there's a couple guys who are a little more consistent than him. When you talk about a 10-year span, there's no one better than Frankie Lindor. But I don't even want to say anything negative about him, honestly, because he doesn't deserve it. Multiple 30-homer seasons. So we'll just leave it there before I go to the next guy.
Yeah. Mookie Betts is going to be my number 4. So that just tells you how stacked the shortstop position is. And this is no shot on Mookie. Just the other 3 guys on this list are just ridiculous. Mookie Betts got hurt last year, only played 116 games, and still had a 4.4 WAR season. I think if you were to knock him on this list, which I just hate doing because Mookie's such a fun, perfect player to watch, walks more than he strikes out, which is just super rare nowadays. His defense at short hasn't really been very Mookie Betts-esque so far. I know they're trying it again with him this year. And then the age, now at this point, creeping up into his mid-30s here in a couple of years. So compared to these other guys, I just don't think you could put him too much higher than a 4 or even a 3 spot as well too. So Mookie Betts gets my number 4, which I'd expect right here for you to say Mookie Betts at number 3.
Yeah, exactly. I went back and forth on this one for a while, but I ended up going with Mookie Betts for one main reason. Not even about the numbers necessarily. I've never seen Mookie Betts in a slump in my life. And I know he's 32, but just the fact that he could play wherever they need him to play. I would love to have Mookie Betts on any team. He's a big reason why the Dodgers won last season. And I can't wait to see him in another full season because with many guys we'll talk about today, and we already have, I don't think he's quite done yet.
Yeah. If you ever want a photo that describes how good Mookie Betts is, look up, I think it's a 2019 photo of him receiving all of his awards with the Red Sox. And he's standing with his wife and his kid in front of this table, and it's got a Silver Slugger, a Gold Glove, the MVP award, the batting title award. It's got 20 different awards that he won from the entirety of the season. It just looks like if you had that up on your entire, mantle from your entire career, you're saying, holy shit, this guy is a ridiculous player. And he did that all alone in 2018. And they also won the World Series that year. So that just tells you how good of a player Mookie Betts is in his career. But with that being said, I have Francisco Lindor as my number 3 guy. He's a year younger than Mookie, so I think that contributes to it as well too. And he's been the most consistent shortstop in baseball since 2015, a la J Ram and Freddie Freeman when it comes to consistency at their positions. It's crazy to think that Frankie Lindor has been in the league for so long. He still feels like that, young, flashy prospect shortstop that is just going to be here forever. And just know that he's probably got 7, 8 more seasons left in him. Makes me happy, but it also makes me sad that we're not going to see him play forever, because he had a 7.8 WAR in 2024, had 33 homers, 29 stolen bases after coming off of a 30-30 season year in the year prior, and I still expect him to have at least 3 or 4 very high quality seasons, just like he had this past year ahead of him as well too. So Frankie Lindor, number 3, definitely the best number 3 on this list for sure. On to number 2, which is also going to be the best number 2 of anyone on this list.
Yeah, I imagine that everyone in the world has Gunnar Henderson at the 2 spot right now. Just unbelievable. He's 23. He plays shortstop every day. He just hit 37 homers in a season, and he's not even scratching the surface yet of what he's capable of doing. When he first came up, I thought maybe this guy could be the next Corey Seager. Let's get him in the postseason and see if he can contribute. I think he could be beyond that now. I'm just excited to see what's next, because it seems like every single at bat he learns something new and gets a little better. It's like one of those guys who will be on MLB Network in 30 years talking about, he threw me a cutter in April and I remembered it in the World Series. And
number 2 for me as well too is going to be Gunnar Henderson. 8 WAR season in 2024, 37 homers at his young age is pretty ridiculous. Definitely, like we just said, the best number 2 on this list. He still has a little bit ways to improve. I think in that K rate lower than 20% is probably the next step for him. And I think once he does that, we'll see 40 homer seasons and probably even higher average than what we did this past year. And if it wasn't for a guy named Bobby Witt, we are saying this guy can win a ton of MVPs. But unfortunately, with how the American League is right now, there just happens to be 2 generational shortstops coming up at the same time. And Gunnar Henderson is the second best out of the 2 of them. Number 1.
Yeah, that's Bobby Witt Jr. You called it right away. I'm always a little skeptical about the high school guys, but this guy's unbelievable. I mean, the only bad thing you can say about him is he doesn't walk as much as the other guys on this list, but this is 40-40 potential, and we're not necessarily talking about potential with this guy. We're talking about he's going to do it this next season for Kansas City. Face of the franchise, completely flipped around their rebuild in an instant, and just really the savior of Kansas City. The first guy since George Brett to do this, and pretty incredible.
Yeah, Bobby Witt's number 1. This season last year, 10.4 WAR in your 3rd big league season is there's not a lot of words that can describe that. He's as pure of a 5-tool player that we've seen in the league since Mike Trout in the beginning of his career, and that just ridiculous run that he had for a solid 5-6 year stretch as being the best player in the league. And Bobby Witt can do that now for the next 7 years at this point. I'd expect an average of 8 WAR seasons over the next 7 to 8 years, and if you do that, we'll see you not in Canton. I was about to say that in Cooperstown once it's all said and done, because he's as early as it is. I think you can make a case to say that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer pretty easily if he keeps this up for even just a couple more seasons as well too. It's really ridiculous. He doesn't strike out much. The walk rate, like you said, maybe could be the one thing that he bumps up. And I'd like to see him, even though I know they won't because it's the Royals and he's their franchise, I would love to see him just let him run and see how many stolen bases he can have, because he could be a guy that has 40 homers and like 80 stolen bases if he really wants to. Best player in baseball? It was hesitant to come out of my mouth there, but I think you could say that as far as value goes, I don't think there's a guy on par with him right now. Maybe Shohei, but
you say we'll wait and see how Shohei looks when he pitches for the Dodgers for the first time. That'll be the factor right there.
Yeah, if Shohei goes 200 innings with a 3 ERA this year, just take away everything I just said. But out of players that are not, out of players that are human, because we both know Shohei isn't human, uh, Bobby Witt is the best out of all of them.
All right.
So moving on, because that does it for that segment. We don't really have too much of a halftime, except for you have a couple things, and I'll let you speak here.
Yeah, we'll get some more positions next week for baseball. I wanted to have one NBA thing and one football thing that we just brushed over before we left here. We'll start with NBA. Biggest news of the week: the Spurs lose maybe the two most important pieces of their franchise this week. Victor Wembanyama out for the season with the blood clot. It's just horrible, man. I mean, this guy, I just last week said maybe he was the best player in the league already, maybe better than Jokic after a year and a half in the league, and we're not going to see him the rest of the year. The big kicker that's really going to start the tank here for the Spurs too is Greg Popovich is also going to be out for the year. He had a stroke in November, never really recovered, and I think it's the right thing. He should probably step away from the game. I was seeing on Twitter he's taken 80 something flights every year. That's just too much for a guy like Popovich. And I was just telling my dad, Pat Riley started coaching around the same time as Pop, and he moved in the front office 20 years ago. Maybe Popovich should have done that, would have helped out the health, but that's not what it's about. We hope both these guys get better. I don't hate the Spurs at all, even though they're in the West, because that's kind of the way an organization's supposed to be run in the NBA. They've done a great job, and now they can only tank for Cooper Flag again, which is somehow possible.
Yeah.
All right. The last thing I want to talk about, the Combine is this week for the NFL. NFL Combine, many of the top guys, the top of the top, choose to skip it for obvious reasons. You're guaranteed to go in the first, but a few guys put on a show for us to guarantee their first round spot. We think back to the past, Anthony Richardson, this past year, even too, Quinyon Mitchell, Nate Wiggins, Xavier Worthy, of course, they ran really well. So a couple guys I'm going to be looking out for. We'll start off with quarterback. Kyle McCord and Will Howard will be throwing there most likely. Just watching those guys throw in person on TV, that could change their draft position a lot. There's so many unknowns in this quarterback class. We don't know if Jackson Dart's going 7 or 57 yet. So just to get out there and throw could change everything in the quarterback market. Some speedsters, Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond, both receivers from Texas. Probably going to kill it at the Combine because speed always kills there. Everyone loves to see the fast guys run. And just one other note, I have Travis Hunter will be doing drills with the DBs. That'll be interesting. Maybe won't decide what he'll end up doing, but give us some context. If his 3-cone and his backpedaling look just as good as the guys who've been playing corner only, maybe that's an indicator that he should go to a team that needs a corner first. That's all I have. Didn't want to go too crazy. It's baseball oriented episodes right now until we get to the draft, and I can't wait to get to some more of those. Oh, we got bets too before the end. That's right. I got a couple.
Yeah. We'll see how the Combine goes this next week. I'm sure there'll be some halftime stuff or even some main stuff to talk about with the Combine and some of the results that we see from that. If you want to get drafted, if you want to make $1 million, run a 4.240.
Yeah,
it's that easy. But going into layup bowl predictions, last week I didn't have any. This week I don't have any, but I have something to watch for.
Okay.
But last week, layup was good for Skyler. Boston -7.5 at Philly on Thursday. That did hit. And this week, what do you got here?
Yeah, college basketball's been really nutty for me this year. It seems like every single team in the top 25 drops a game every week. So I'm going back to the NBA. They've been good to me on my picks this year. So my layup's going to be the Houston Rockets minus, I'm not really sure, around 7. They're playing San Antonio on Wednesday. They're going to be without their coach and their best player. CP3 stepped up. He's been pretty good. Stephon Castle is taking things over on the offense, but I don't think it's enough to beat Houston. Houston just played really well against Minnesota and OKC.
Yeah, last week bowl prediction. I didn't make one. Skyler had a good one, though. GSW over the Sacramento Kings on Friday night. That did happen. The Warriors stay hot. This week, I don't have one either. But Skyler, what do you got here?
I got the rare East over West on Friday night, ESPN. I got Detroit over Denver. That should be a really great game. And my thinking here was that Detroit has been on fire. They really wanted to go to the playoffs. Cade Cunningham has been great. Jaden Ivey broke his leg, so Cade has really turned into a superstar this season. And Denver doesn't really care about the regular season right now. So I say they could drop one to Detroit, who's looking to move up in that top 4 of the East.
And my one thing to watch for, because I feel bad for not having anything
Yeah.
on here, even though I don't want to make a bet that I wouldn't do myself. Friday, Tennessee is playing Oklahoma State in baseball. Tennessee ace Liam Doyle has been on a ridiculous tear to start. Currently ranked as the number 75 draft prospect according to MLB Pipeline. I'd expect that to jump up based off of his last 2 performances. But if you got a chance to watch that and you're sitting around your house on Friday afternoon saying, damn, I wish there was sports on right now, just turn on Tennessee baseball and go watch Liam Doyle and his ridiculous fastball work because he's fun to watch. And I expect him to jump up quite a bit from that number 75 spots on the draft rankings once we get to June and teams are actually calling players to pick.
Yeah, I mentioned to you the other day, it feels like we may have about 35 starting pitchers go in the top 60 picks in the draft. And I definitely want to grab a couple of those as a team who needs some starting pitching.
Yeah, it's a good year for it looks like. And probably going to be a good year for it for next year as well, too. And maybe even more in the future. Who knows? But that's going to do it for episode 233. Episode 234 next week. First episode of March, same season that the baseball season starts, which will be pretty cool. Maybe we'll follow through with this episode and get into some top maybe 10 outfielder choices, some pitcher choices as well, too, and maybe some combine winners, losers, stuff like that. And yeah, that's all I really got. You got any closing remarks?
1 week closer to opening day. It's going to be a wild season, guys. We're going to have a lot of teams at 80 wins, and I hope we're a part of that. I hope we could surpass the Angels. That'd be cool.
I do too. I do too.
All right, we'll see you guys next Tuesday for 234. Adios.